Hello everyone, my name is Lauren and I'm a part of the learning team at the London Transport Museum. Thank you so much for joining us today. What we're going to be doing today is talking to some of our lovely STEM ambassadors about all things engineering and sustainability. So without further ado, let's meet our ambassadors. First of all, I'm going to introduce you to Salome. Salome, would you like to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Salome. I am a senior CAD engineer at TfL, and what that means is that I create and manage the drawings that are used by clients, our builders and designers, and eventually they get archived for further projects later down the line to use. Pallav, would you like to go next?
Thanks, Salome. Hi, I'm Pallav, and I am an operation control lead. So as Salome said, they do the CAD work, and what we do is take those CAD work and put them into reality. So my job is to ensure those traffic signals work perfectly fine, the road works are working perfectly fine, and any of the road layout changes that may be happening are happening in line with what has been designed by Salome. So that's me in a nutshell. Over to you, Meg.
Hi everyone, my name is Meg and I'm working as a senior estimator. So I'm taking the drawings that Salome is producing and I'm pricing them, meaning that I have to do a takeoffs and then make sure that it's enough money in the budget to deliver the project on site. Back to you, Lauren.
Great, so those are our three ambassadors, and as you can see, they all work in slightly different areas of engineering projects, which is great for what we're going to be talking about today. So first of all, I think what we need to really do is kind of clarify what an engineer is. So I'm going to throw this out to all the ambassadors. I'm going to start with Pallav, and I want you to kind of just, if you can, in a nutshell, sum up what you would say to someone if they ask you, what is an engineer?
That's a very good question, Lauren. Engineering, as you might have a perception, is just about connecting the dots and joining the nuts and bolts. No, it isn't. It is about thinking of a problem that may exist around us, solving the problem, having a proper discussion, making sure the solution that we are trying to do is safe, sustainable, viable, and has, should we say, a proper financial profit for the people or the benefit for the people, for which I think Meg can talk more about. Over to you, Meg.
Yes, you're right, Pallav. We've got our main thing is actually to work as a team, because no one in engineering can actually deliver the project by themselves. So it means that we have to work with our designers, with our structure engineers, with our QSs, with our planners, risk managers, project managers, sponsors, whoever is actually involved in the process to actually deliver the project in the budget and during the proper time. So probably Salome will be the best to actually explain to you what actually engineering means for someone who is producing the drawings. Back to you, Salome.
Thanks, Meg, and thanks, Pallav. I think the two of them have really summed up really well what engineering means. I would add to that engineering does rely a lot on balancing the knowledge, skills, and experience that you have with the knowledge, skills, and experience that the rest of your team have to create this final project that gets delivered for the public service. Back to you, Lauren. Thank you.
That was great. So that, I think, is gives you a really good idea of what an engineer does, but also what an engineer kind of needs to have, the skills they need to have. So we know it's about problem solving, team working is really important. It's about trying to balance, your area of expertise with what other people know. And I think that's a really good way to look at engineering. I think I'm going to throw this out to my ambassadors in a minute, but I think a lot of people have a perception of engineering as, oh, they build things. and they need to be sciencey. That's generally an impression that a lot of people have when they think of engineering. However, the actual engineering field is huge. There are so many different types of engineering, and even going forward into the future, more and more are emerging. So actually, what's really key isn't necessarily thinking about, like, well, I need to build a building or I need to create a vehicle. It's actually more about having certain skills. So being able to problem solve, being creative, being able to work really well in a team. So what I would like to ask my engineers now is, we've kind of got an idea of what they see an engineer as. Actually, why did they become an engineer in the first place? What made them go, oh, sounds like a job for me? So Meg, could you maybe start by telling us a little bit about why you chose engineering?
No problem. So I chose engineering because my dad has a building company. And I was lucky enough that I was growing up in a time before all of the health and safety regulations. So I can visit my dad while he was building buildings, hospitals, schools, you name it, everything. And I just like asking questions. And I was probably very annoying to all of the workers that my dad has at the time. By asking how you're doing it. I love seeing the building growing, and I couldn't actually wait when we actually will have a lift installed on site, and concrete pump is going to come and all of this stuff. It was just something that I enjoyed because it was a lot of fun. No one was telling me that I'm getting dirty and probably no one actually was too bothered that a little girl was running around the site asking questions and trying to work out how things work. And I think just because of all of the joy of actually being on site and asking questions and having so many people around me actually answering those questions, because they knew that I'm interested in whatever task they were doing. Everything for me was interesting, and everyone who is doing something with pride, they want to talk about it because they want to share that I am also the part of the team and I'm delivering this together with my team. How is that?
I became an engineer. Actually, I'm an architect by training. And what inspired me went from a young age was the built environment, how a whole landscape can really change how a society functions, but right down to the smallest details of how a specific door handle makes it easier for someone with mobility issues to open a door. And I found that those things that range from right from the of a grand vision, really inspiring to how I want to contribute my life's work to it. I was really fortunate that I was able to train in Singapore as well as in Edinburgh before I moved to London. So I had a vast variety of experience as well, which was great. Over to you, Pallav. I'd like to hear about yours.
Thanks, Salome. My story from you two is absolutely different. When I was a child, I never wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to be a pilot, and I wanted to fly planes. As a kid, you always have your own fascination and your own story. But then what I also enjoyed was solving problems, looking at things and trying to understand, can I dismantle it, which was one of my favorite thing. None of my toys were safe. I always dismantled them, always. Some of them didn't. And, those kind of things have their own implications as well, which I'm not going to talk in detail. So yeah, those kind of bits as I grew up grew in me, and I wanted to solve problems which were in front of me. And I saw, I got an opportunity to be innovative and go into competitions where I had to design bike with some different materials, look for a sailing bike, look for how much energy consumption are we having in our uni, and try to see what are the alternatives. And those kind of bits always drew my attention. And that's how I decided to really move away from my childhood fascination into engineering world. Over to you, Lorraine.
Great. So you can actually see with all our three ambassadors, they've all kind of come at it from very different places. And like Pallav said, you know, actually he started off not wanting to be an engineer. He wanted to be a pilot. It was that fascination with kind of deconstructing things and working out how things work, how to make them work better, which is what really connects to engineering. What I really like about what all our engineers have just talked about is some things that I think might surprise people a little bit at a job in engineering. So for example, Salome talked about having in Singapore, in Edinburgh, and then in London. And I think that's a really key thing to remember with engineering is it's a job that is universal. It's a job that can take you anywhere in the world. We need engineers everywhere. Every country, every city, every project has its own unique challenges and its own elements that are really going to help you build something very, very unique. So the thing that comes to mind for me is if we look at the London Underground. So for those of you that don't know, London Underground was the first underground in the world ever. So it was a completely new and amazing thing. It's just over 150 years old. And when it was first built, they had not really any idea of how successful it was going to be. But there were certain things that made London a really great site for the London's first underground. First of all, it was incredibly busy. So they knew they were going to have the passenger numbers. Also physically, London, a lot of London is built on something called London clay, which is a great material to build an underground in because it's quite waterproof, but it's sort of soft enough that you can move it out of the way. Then it's quite strong and it's great for having structures underground. So there you can really see how engineering in London is going to be very different than when you want to say build an underground in Paris or somewhere else. Another thing was brought up at Pallav at the end was that idea of having to think about taking ideas that already exist, adjusting them. And this is where I think sustainability really comes in. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about now, is how sustainability, this idea that we need to start looking after our environment a bit better, how that has started feeding into the work of engineers. So how it changes how they work, how it changes what they're trying to achieve with their projects. So Salome, can you maybe talk a little bit about how you've seen sustainability creep more and more into the work that you're doing?
Sure, thank you, Lauren. I can come at it from two angles. The first in our day-to-day design work, wherein the design engineers that I work with are using more ways to either ensure that the projects are longer term and longer lasting, but also that when it comes to the end of their life, they can be dismantled and recycled, reused, or in some way just not going to a landfill. In a second way, personally, in our own day-to-day work in CAD, we've moved away from paperwork towards a more digital environment, which helps us to save on the trees that we're using, but also to facilitate the movement of information around the globe. Meg, would you like to tell us a bit more?
Thank you, Salome. Yeah, what we are doing, we also move towards digital. Everything is actually done on either AutoCAD or we have PDF drawings that they are delivered to us when we are working. And also we all train as chartered engineers in BIM. And we also can price projects using BIM. So it's actually the BIM model is actually used towards the life of the project, whatever structures. But also in TfL, we are putting a lot of impact into rain gardens and green roofs, and also sustainable drainage that we're using in London. And we even have some trials on the perforated tarmac, just to try to avoid to have overflow of our drainage. But we see more and more how the impact of green actually affects life in London, especially because you have to remember that you have all of those concrete walls around you, either glass or steel, that then they're just trapping the heat. And we are trying to introduce more and more greenery to actually break that and to just reduce the level of the temperature and also the pollutions in London. So you also probably see all of the ULIS and the other programs that they are reducing the number of cars in London and introducing either cycling or just walking in London. So hopefully Pallav will be able to tell you more about it.
Thanks, Meg. You really brought in a very important point that our city is at a break point where if we have more cars coming in, then the air quality of London would be severely crippled. And my job as an engineer is to look for solutions and ways on the roads where we can make it a little bit more greener. So all our road transformations have to keep in mind that we encourage people to do more cycling. We have more and more people walking around. I think it's part of Mayor's strategy as well, that people walk more for short distances rather than doing a journey with their car or something. We want to encourage people to really do a lot of cycling, be safe on the road, and make sure they can cycle more and more. So the recent journey or recent transformation that we had was creating a whole raft of network of cycling on the London road, which is what our team did contribute, and I was part of it. The other bit is traffic signals, which is also in the purview of our work, where we have to design traffic signals in order that the cars who stay there for a minimum time. Because, you know, if your car is on an idle, it emits a lot of poisonous gases, dangerous gases, which can pollute the London environment. So our job is to optimize those signals to make sure that the car stays there for an optimum time. If there is a road blockage, or say we have got traffic jam somewhere and there is congestion, we make sure that the signals are optimized in such a way that the flow remains continuous. There's no halting of car at any junction of a point. The traffic is modulated and controlled in such a way that people can move around and the cars do not stay for long. So these are the kind of challenges that we have day to day. And over our long term, what we are trying to do is create a sustainable solution on the road to ensure we have better air quality. The signals are learning from what is happening around the junction. The vehicles would be communicating, so we get the information from the vehicle that this is the speed that they have come from in past few hours. So we can modulate our signal and ask the traffic to move smoothly and slowly. Over to you, Lauren.
Great answers, thank you. I love these ambassadors, they're great. So we've touched on some really interesting things there. What you can see is that within London Transport, but also just within engineering as a whole, sustainability and green thinking is very much at the forefront now. So there's a couple of key things. Sustainability and accessibility are both things that in London Transport have really moved to the forefront of all the projects that go ahead now. You know, with it being, especially with things like the Underground being 150 years old, they are great in terms of they've stood the test of time engineering wise. They're very stable structures. However, with things like accessibility and sustainability, they weren't necessarily built with that in mind in the way that we build things now. So what I do want to talk about, and so it's something Salome said that kind of got me thinking about this. I can remember being at school, and the huge thing when I was the age of probably our viewers now was all about recycling. It was very much a push for, if you've got rubbish and things, recycle it. What seems to have happened more in the last, I'd say, 10 years or so, especially in the last 5 years, is actually going, well, hang on, rather than always recycling, we should be thinking about things even earlier on than that, as in making things that we can repurpose, so we don't have to go through process necessarily of recycling it, which takes energy, which in itself can cause a little bit of, you know, pollution and things like that. it's about being a bit more innovative, if you like. So for example, I'm thinking of, if you think of shipping containers, I've seen this living in London. I've also, I'm from Birmingham. You see this in Birmingham a lot. What's become a big thing is repurposing shipping containers as storage units or as shops. You see that, you see it everywhere. It's kind of a thing that has really taken off. And this is great because rather than taking the shipping container, breaking it down for its materials and then turning it into something else, you can actually keep it as it is and just adjust it, which is even better for the environment. So I think what I would like to ask my ambassadors, I'm going to start with Salome again, is about this idea of when you're doing projects now, how much are you thinking about, well, how can I stop pollution, or how can I stop a negative impact happening from the get-go, rather than how do we take the negative impact and turn that into something else?
Yes, that's a great question. And in fact, more and more that mentality is baked right into the beginning of a project before we even start considering how we're going to design it. And really right from the point where we realize there is a problem, everybody involved within this, whom we call stakeholders, are thinking about the renewable aspects of that, the longevity of this, and how it can affect people in the future. To the extent that we are beginning projects from 5 years ago that deal with the capacity that we expect London to reach in 2030. So looking forward is really important. And more our projects are looking at the whole life cycle. So right from the finding the problem, designing for the problem, building the problem, and then dismantling the solution. Excuse me. So our engineers are all highly trained at looking at these things. And this is where our problem solving aspects really come to the fore of looking at new ideas, finding new research and bringing that into the way that we work to pull it all together. Pallav, would you like to say some more?
Thanks, Salome. Yeah, as I just said a while back, the sustainability and keeping things to be more environmental friendly is within our DNA. The idea is to make people think about what they are doing, and even before the project gets started, we really need to think about, will it be a sustainable solution, not just today, not just 5 years down the line, but 10 years down the line. You would be surprised to know some of the projects that we start are because we want to make our things more sustainable. So say, for example, if we are modernizing our traffic signals, that is to keep in mind what will happen in 2030 or 2040 for that sake. So within those bits, like reviving the traffic signal boards, they have to be of a sustainable material, which could be recycled if anything goes wrong in there. Roadwork solutions that we are having, or the road layout design that we are having, have to incorporate more of the cycling route. Now, what happens is, initially, we used to have a bus lane and a car lane. Now we have got cycling coming into picture, which brings in the safety of pedestrian, safety of cyclist into aspect, and the scene becomes even more challenging because you have to satisfy all the three people which are on road, and the fourth, which is the pedestrian crossing the road. So the problem becomes even more challenging. Now, to add on top of it, what we really have to see is, are we making sense? Are we making the air quality better so that we are not really making the London air worse than what it is, and making sure giving the right priority to the right team at the right time. So these are the kind of question and challenges we face in our day-to-day in terms of sustainability, longevity, and making the environment a little bit better than what it is today. Over to you, Meg.
Thank you, Pallav. What I would like to add also is two things. First, we are changing especially on the London Underground, We are changing the stations to be more accessible. We call those projects step 3 access. We're introducing the lifts. We are with footbridges and also a wider gate line for people that they have either disabilities or they have stroller, so mothers with children. So that's one of the way to actually make the use of the stations that they are existing in our network for longer use. The other thing what we are doing when we have unused subways, we are using the rain gardens that I mentioned to you before. So the rain gardens are a little bit of plot of land that we are trying to make a catch pit for the rain. So we are not actually getting the rain flowing into the drain straight away. We are just trying that water to be captured and have a garden system that we can just introduce a special plants that they are more robust for staying in London, and also picking the trees that they are not going to block our drainage. So there is a lot of different elements that we are trying to reuse our structures and make the different life a different purpose. And that's all because of engineering, and start to think of what we can do with it and how we can make it better for either passengers or to our environment. Back to you, Lauren.
Great. This has brought me really nicely, actually, onto a point that I want us to consider, because we've kind of been talking about all the great stuff about engineering, about all the, you can be creative, you're problem solving, about how we're tackling the growing problem of our environmental impact. Something that all three of you have just touched on that I think is really interesting and that people forget a little bit is about, one, how engineering is, a lot of the times, it's very much about trying to change not just physical things, so not just building a building or changing something physical, but actually changing the way people behave and the way people interact with things. And I think this is something that people really underestimate. So we, for example, with the work that Pallav was talking about signalling, talking about how that's going to influence how traffic moves around, but also how all the different users of a service to move around a city. So you can't just think about the people in the cars, you're thinking about the pedestrians, you're thinking about the cyclists, you're thinking about how do you encourage people to use these different forms of transport. And I think another thing that was brought up that is very, very interesting is also how you balance what you're trying to achieve with your project with what everyone else is trying to achieve. So this is something that, like with most jobs, especially in engineering, can be a real challenge. So I want us to talk a little bit about the challenge of trying to balance all the different things you're trying to get from your project. So for example, wanting to create something that is sustainable for the environment, but at the same time also has to be sustainable from a financial point of view. That's a huge consideration, especially when we're looking at something like London transport, which can generate huge amounts of money, but can also cost huge amounts of money. So Meg, I'm going to throw this one to you, because I feel like with your job role, this will be really good. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how you have to try and balance all these different things within a project, that actually all the engineers and all the different people within a project are going to be wanting slightly different things, and how you balance those out?
Yes, we are in an estimating department. We have the best joy of actually trying to put together a working project. You are doing this on the paper first, using numbers. You are pricing every aspect of it. Your sponsor and your project manager, they have a brilliant idea that I would like everyone, all the best items, and it has to last for 150 years, and it has to have the best material, and you are using the newest technology and stuff. All of that is coming with a price, and with all of the strains that we actually have in London, you have to remember that you whatever you will do, you will be working with neighbors. So you will either have members of public, or you will have other services, like you will be working close to the hospital, or you will be working close to the network rail track. And that gives you the opportunity to actually, well, it's giving you another challenge that you have to think about, that you cannot do everything during daytime work. Some work you have to do during nighttime. When you are working nights, unfortunately, everything is more expensive, because you have to have an extra security and extra health and safety measures while working on at night, especially if you're working on a network rail tracks. You have a different team that actually allowing to do that stuff. But with every element, you are doing a lot of trials. So you need to make sure that you've got the program that is reliable and actually it's sensible. So you cannot just say, I can do it in 2 days and I can build a house. That's not going to happen, because you need to have a proper plan of who is going to do what first, and you have to just grow from there. Then you have different teams of people that they are just saying, okay, we can do it this way. And then if, for example, you will end up saying that actually, I would like to do it this way, but I don't have money for that. What else can I do that will cost less, but will do the same task? So you have a lot of value engineering meetings with a team, and you are doing savings. There is some aspect you can do savings. There is other things that you are just thinking, oh, I cannot swap. For example, if you need a roof, you still need a roof. You cannot swap it for a plastic bag on top of it, your building. So you have to actually make a sensible decisions of what elements you can replace as an alternative, which one you actually have to make work. And if the materials that you're choosing, you cannot change them, is there maybe a methodology that I can change? Is there maybe I can make the building smaller? Maybe that will save me some money. So everything is actually, before you actually will get on site, there is many months that you are spending with your architect, with your planner, with your risk manager, and with your project team, trying to discuss what is exactly the main purpose of your project, and then just work for this, and how much money I've got for that, just to try to avoid overspending, because as all we know, everything is about the money and trying to be on the budget. So other project can also happen. So hopefully Salome now will be able to tell us a little bit more about how she's changing everything within the drawings to actually match what the engineers want to actually deliver on site.
I worry I've slightly over-egged my position there. But yes, so what we do to balance the needs of the project is that we work together, really. Teamwork is so important within any project. So if an engineer would like to propose a solution and it doesn't quite work with another discipline's engineer, we have to work together to figure out the solution. And so my job is really to help them coordinate that all within the drawing environment, really. But something I did want to say is that TfL as a company really can, and it is brave and takes risks, because as a huge company, a public service company, we have the leverage, and we do use the leverage to change people's mindsets for the better. So for example, the ULEZ scheme that was mentioned earlier encourages people to think of different ways of using their time for journeying, of using cycling instead of bicycles. The step-free access, which Meg mentioned earlier, allows us to also think about other people who have different mobility requirements, and therefore I'd like to think also encourages empathy within our passengers. So TfL does use its position as a huge company very wisely, I think, and therefore oftentimes what we think of as the problem is weighted very heavily. Also, I mean, finance is a huge impact right now, especially after COVID, but also on the intentions that we would like to achieve across people's lives. Pallav, would you like to add a bit more to that?
Thanks, Salome. I think both of you have really highlighted the points that are relevant in business, like finance, the impact on the lives of people. What I would like to add is every business survives because they give a profitable, sustainable solution. They keep customers in mind. And based on whatever we said just now, people might think that we do not like each other as a department, but that's not true. It is always, we do have our differences, and engineering is all about resolving those differences and coming with a viable solution. Just to give you an example and elaborate a bit more about it, if you have got a junction where you want to design a new layout which could really accommodate the cycling, the cars, you would like to do is allocate all three of them with equal space. However, the space in London is a big constraint. Now you cannot change that, and you cannot allocate the uh, three mode of transport equal spaces. There are regulations that a car would be sufficiently long, a bus would be a sufficiently wide, and you have to keep that in mind and make sure you overcome that space constraint, allocate efficient space and effective space so that the things can run smoothly. We talked about working at night. Those are the kind of priorities that we really need to juggle as well. Now, what happens is working at night is there might be some unsafe practices. So engineering is not about just getting a solution done, but staying safe as well. The lives of people do matter to us. And those kind of safe practices also need to be incorporated into engineering. So engineering is not just about connecting dot, assembling things. It is a lot more fun playing with numbers, playing with space, being safe, and creating an impact to the life of people. I think that should summarize of what are the kind of priorities that we really need to balance in our day-to-day lives. Over to you, Lauren.
Sorry, my unmute wasn't working there. That was a great sum up. And I've got to say, I think you all explored that really well, because I think what we can reflect on is, like all our ambassadors just said, collaboration is key for engineering. Because with engineering projects, even with what you'd think of as, a small project, you've got so many different teams and different considerations coming into play that you've got to be able to work collaboratively and be able to ideas, but also look at other people's ideas and go, and how do I work with that, and what do I do with that? So I think that's really important, and that brings me on really nicely to what I wanted to stress as well. Is this is where as well that idea of engineering is much broader than what we think. So we have a project. We think of maybe what we think of the typical engineering roles, or the roles that we jump to, but there's so many around that. So for example, in TfL, you'll have engineers working on things like game design, so game engineers, all the video games we play, all the apps we interact with, engineers have worked on those, and that forms a really important part about encouraging that idea of changing people's behavior and of giving them options and informing them of how they can use transport differently and how they can see transport differently. And there's all kinds of engineering jobs that are way out of what you might think. Materials engineering is really interesting because that's looking at all the different things of how do we create new materials, how do we use the materials we've got, what can we do with them, and also looking at things like accessibility. So it really has a really broad range and a really broad impact. And I think our ambassadors just really showed how much they're all thinking about, and how many different people they get to work with, which is a great thing in any job. Now we're coming towards the end of our discussion, so I'm going to pose one more question to our ambassadors, because what we want to think about now is you, the viewers. You're going to be our next generation of engineers, so you're going to be facing some of the problems that our engineers currently face, but also new ones. And what I want to ask my ambassadors is, what do you want to say to our budding engineers, to people who are thinking there's no way I could ever be an engineer, but also maybe to people who are thinking, well, it sounds interesting? What kind of words of encouragement, or what's the kind of final thing you'd want to say to them? to think about engineering, to really think about going into it potentially as a career. Meg, I'm going to start with you, so let's throw over to you.
Thank you. Well, I think it's always with the engineering is just to be open-minded. There is so many possibilities you can do as an engineer. I never thought I would be working in so many different places with so many different people. And whatever you will do as an engineer and whatever you end up, 2 + 2 is always 4, even if you will be working in China or you will be working in America. And the thing that is the most important is just to find the place that is actually giving you the most joy. And I hope you will be actually working with the same people that has the same passion as you, that they will actually have joy of building, the same joy that I have. And you will actually appreciate all of the team that is around you, because you are working with it as a team with so many people, and what they actually are bringing is to actually develop you during the process of going from one project to another. Every day you are learning something new, and it's just to seeing all of this progress of working together and how much actually that work is giving you back. It's probably the most what is encouraging to become an engineer, just to work with people and be proud of what you do. I think Salome will have also some encouragement words to you.
I do. That was great, Meg. And I'd like to build on what she said about being open-minded. And a really lovely way to do that is really to expand your subject choices even now. So for example, you might think that as an engineer, I just did maths and physics and science and blah. I also did history and art. And I ended up having to give geography because it was a little bit much. But I highly encourage you to pull all of your experiences together, because that's what helps you to solve art gallery if that's not what you normally do. Try a different type of football team. All of these experiences can be pulled. Stay open-minded, to be creative, which is really helpful in problem solving. So I encourage you to do that. Pallav, would you like to add some more?
Thanks very much, Salome. You really touched upon a very critical point, that engineering is not just about subject choices. It's about exploring your own solution, exploring your own way. You can be engineer via different modes. You can have any channel, what you like. Personally, I'm a materials engineer, and I had a lot of study about how materials can change the world. But then with time, with everything, and with my interest evolving, I went into technology side. I learned about budgeting. So engineering is a vast field. It's so diverse that you just can't imagine. If I talk about my own team does visualization as well. It does modeling as well. When I say visualization, whatever modeling solution we come up, we really put it into the picture for our management to understand that this is the solution that we are looking up for, and this is the impact that it will have in reality based on certain assumptions. So these are the kind of things. So you get involved with mathematics, you get involved with art as well, because you need to be artistic to really visualize those things. You really get into physics as well, how the fluid will flow, or for the matter, the traffic will flow. You get into chemistry as well. You got all the subjects to really explore. So engineering is not just about 1 or 2, 3 subjects, which people often think. It's a very diverse field, and you can come to engineering from any field that you like. So be open, be adaptive, and I think you'll be a successful engineer is what I would say. Over to you, Lauren.
What a great sum up and great words of encouragement for any of your viewers who are thinking about becoming engineers. Well, I'm afraid that is all we've got time for today. I want to say a huge thank you to my 3 ambassadors who have been amazing, really, really amazing. Thank you. And we can't wait to see you, everyone at home, at the museum again, hopefully soon, fingers crossed. If you want any more information about Key Stage 3 events that we're going to be running on the website, check out the schools tab and see how you can get even more excited about engineering. That's all we've got time for today. Thank you, everyone. Take care, and we will see you soon.